Welcome everyone to this IAEA side event looking at the role of nuclear in combating climate change with a future leader's perspective. My name's Edie Greaves. I will be your chair today. My day job is Head of International for Advanced Nuclear Technologies at BEIS. And we have a wonderful panel to talk to this morning. And for some of us very early in the morning, Matthew is joining us from Canada, where it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm afraid we have a couple of housekeeping notices. If everyone could keep their cameras off and themselves on mute, unless they're asking a question later on. And this event will be recorded. So if you don't, by staying, you are agreeing to be a part of the recording. So we have a slight change in the scheduled guest speaker to kick us off. We are very fortunate to have Ambassador Corin Kitzel, who is the ambassador for the UK to the IAEA, who will be kicking us off this morning with some introductory remarks. Over to you.
Thanks, Edie, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. Yes, as you can see, clearly I'm not the minister, but unfortunately he has to go into Parliament this morning to talk about gas, I think. But I'm really delighted to be here opening this side event from the UK delegation office at the General Conference here in Vienna. And I certainly want to thank you, those of you who woke up very early or have stayed up really late to join us. And it's really exciting to have this panel of future leaders discussing such a crucial global topic, the role of nuclear technologies in combating climate change. And I'm going to start just by setting out the UK's view on why this is such an important topic, and why we've put it at the forefront of our domestic policies and efforts. And I guess, as you will all know, climate change remains high on the UK's agenda. And with COP26 in Glasgow now really fast approaching, we have a clear vision for how the UK is going to reduce carbon emissions to net zero by 2050. And earlier this year, the UK announced that we're going to cut our emissions by 78% by 2035 compared to 1990 levels. And achieving those crucial targets is going to rely really heavily on decarbonisation of the power sector. And of course, that's where nuclear energy comes in. And our detailed plan is set out in the UK's Energy White Paper, which I'm sure some of you have seen, which highlights the central role that nuclear energy will play as a reliable source of low carbon energy, and our commitment to nuclear as part of our net zero strategy. And crucially, this low carbon power generation technology can provide energy when the wind isn't blowing or when the sun isn't shining. And in addition to building Hinkley Point C, the UK plans to bring at least one large nuclear power station to the point of final investment decision during this Parliament. And we've announced further support for new smaller scale technologies as we begin to make advanced nuclear technologies a reality in the UK. And this includes up to £385 million for an advanced nuclear fund to support the development of small modular reactors and to support research and development into advanced modular reactors as these technologies progress towards commercialization. And I'm delighted to say that the next generation of nuclear professionals, which is all of you, are more than up to the task of driving this technology forward. And we will pool our nuclear expertise on these new and exciting technologies with partners to tackle the global common challenges posed by climate change that require a global response. So this isn't just about young people in the UK, but across the globe. And as set out in the UK's nuclear sector deal, we believe that by harnessing diversity of thought, we can drive even further innovation into the sector and into the next wave of nuclear technology. And we strongly believe that a more diverse workforce drives innovation. And I look forward to hearing all of our panelists' experiences and perspectives on this. So Now let me hand over to our panel of future leaders. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ambassador. I will now take us through an introduction round to our panel members before we will then get more into the discussion, and you'll be able to ask questions, and I will also reserve some time at the end for just audience questions. So, should we start with Sarah Lynn Thomas, who is a senior consultant at Abbott Risk Consulting and part of the at the Nuclear Institute. I'm going to sorry, got some feedback. Is that me?
Hi, thanks, Edie. Good morning, everyone, afternoon, evening, wherever you're joining us from. So my name is Sarah Lynn Thomas, and as Edie said, I'm a senior consultant at Abbott Risk Consulting, where I specialise in nuclear safety case development. I have around 6 years experience in the nuclear industry, and I've worked for a variety of clients on safety case development, as well as radioactive waste management. I am also the Vice Chair and International Liaison for the Nuclear Institute Young Generation Network, having volunteered for the YGN in my own time since 2016. As International Liaison, I oversee the YGN's international engagement, including our presence at COP26 in Glasgow in just a few weeks' time.
Marvellous. Yeah, it's only 6 weeks away, and I think it's at the forefront of most of our minds. The buzzing seems to have stopped, so I'll carry on and introduce Miguel Trencul Lopez, who is an assistant engineer at Magnox Limited and director of BEIS Games.
Yeah, so in my day job, I work for Magnox, so I work in the innovation program in asset management. So I get to play around with drones, robots, and AI to try and figure out how we can make decommissioning cheaper, faster, more effective, and safer. I also am the director of Curious Games, so we develop educational games to inspire curiosity and sustainable energy, which we have done so with our first game, Megawatt, delivered to around 40 schools in the northwest of England. And I'm also a member of the COP26 delivery team, along with Sarah Lynn and Matt.
Marvellous. And moving on now to our outside of nuclear perspective, we have Tad Buxton and Indy Penny, who are founding partners and co-creative directors at Tad and Indy Creative Consulting.
Hi. So we're a creative team working in advertising, doing art direction and copywriting. We were studying at an ad school in Brixton last year called the School of Communication Arts.
Yeah, so while we were studying, we were set an advertising brief by EDF Energy to change the public perceptions around nuclear energy. And after answering it, we were asked to join the panel. So we're here to show an outside perspective of the industry and explain our journey to getting on board with nuclear.
Sorry, struggling to find the unmute button there a second. Thanks. And next we have Nancy Mberia, who is a technical officer at Nuclear Power and Energy in Kenya.
All right, hello everyone. And as Edie said, I work for the Nuclear Power and Energy Agency in Kenya as a technical officer. And the agency is a government parastatal tasked with, among other things, fast-tracking development of nuclear electricity generation in Kenya. My academic background is in economics, and my work for the agency primarily entails carrying out technical studies as well as drafting policies on and strategies for different issues within the country's nuclear power program. I also contribute to the country's national energy planning process and development of national energy plans, and this is within an established multi-agency framework in the country. And in the course of my work, I've developed keen interest in areas of sustainable policy formulation, energy resource exploitation, energy mix creation, and carbon emission reduction. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. And finally, we have Matthew Myringer, who's a technical assistant at Ontario Power Generation in Canada.
Morning, everyone. As I'm saying from Canada, I'm Matthew Myringer. So for my day job, I work at Ontario Power Generation. Actually just started a new role, so I'm a business analyst in nuclear waste. So looking at strategy, commercial operations, how we can reduce volumes and become better at dealing with nuclear waste. Outside of that, I do work with Sarah Lynn and Miguel on the NIYGN COP26 delivery team. I'm the Canadian Operating Officer of North American Young Generation Nuclear, which is very similar to the NIYGN, but it's North America based. I'm also a board of director with the Canadian Nuclear Association and a young energy professional with Energy Council of Canada. My academic background is nuclear engineering, so I am a nuclear engineer, and I look forward to this discussion.
Thank you very much to all of our panelists for being here this morning and very early morning, possibly night. We're going to keep it fairly informal, and I'll be asking questions to each of our panelists, and then the other panelists are very welcome to continue the conversation and add additional points of view. For the audience, if you're very welcome to ask questions in the chat, and we will continue the conversation, engaging the audience later on, because we are fortunate enough to have an hour and a half for this whole session. So unless there's any urgent changes or thoughts, should we start with a question for Sarah Lynn, which is, what is the UK YGN and how are the YGN getting involved in COP26?
Thanks, Edie. So the YGN is the Young Members branch of the Nuclear Institute, which is the professional membership body for the UK nuclear sector. And our mission is all about encouraging and developing the UK's early career nuclear professionals and ensuring their voice is heard in shaping the future of our sector. And we do this by 3 different themes: encourage, develop and engage. Encourage is all about attracting a diverse range of people to join the industry in the first place, and importantly to stay there, and improving the understanding of nuclear science and technology. So we do that in a variety of ways, such as working on STEM initiatives. Not long ago, we put on a school speaking competition called Speak Up for Net Zero, and engaging with universities and apprenticeship schemes. We also work really closely with the Nuclear Skills Strategy Group here in the UK to excite the next generation. So that's the first bit. And then because we're a membership body, our develop theme focuses on providing opportunities for young professionals to develop themselves. So we organise several events for our members, including seminars on different areas of the industry, such as waste management and decommissioning, regulation, new build. And then our flagship event for our members and beyond is in November every year, our seminar and dinner, and we have around 300 people there. And this year we'll be doing that in Edinburgh to coincide with COP26 just down the road. And then under engage, that's all about collaborating with strategic initiatives and networks in the UK. And that involves advocating for the voice of the young generation, which is where we come to COP26. So it's all a little bit confusing how we've gotten involved, but essentially the Nuclear Institute is a member society of the European Nuclear Society, and they are a UNFCCC accredited NGO and funding member of Nuclear for Climate. And for each COP, Nuclear for Climate partners with the Young Generation Association from the hosting country. There's loads of us. And we're then asked to coordinate presence in the UN zone and run a series of pre-COP activities. So essentially, we have partnered with the European Nuclear Society for COP26. And the backbone of all of these is something we've been calling the Net Zero Needs Nuclear campaign. We launched that back in February of this year, and it's got 2 aims. The principal aims are promoting and raising awareness of nuclear as a low carbon energy source, driving support for it as a key part of our path to net zero, influencing policymakers in advance of COP26, and envisioning sustainable collaboration between nuclear and renewables. So we've got a dedicated campaign website at netzeroneedsnuclear.com, I will probably be putting a load of links in the chat box throughout just to let everyone know where they can go. But I really encourage everyone to get involved and ensure nuclear is at the table at COP26, whether that's taking part in our social media campaign, reading a position paper we've co-authored with Nuclear for Climate, joining our mailing lists, and really importantly, we have a letter tool on the website where you can send a letter to key policymakers about why net zero needs nuclear, and you can do that with just a few clicks. So that is a whistle-stop tour of how we've gotten involved and everything we're doing. There's so much more to say, but I'll stop there for the time being.
Thanks very much. My plan is to sort of whisk round asking lots of questions to different people. So please, if you're in the audience, do raise your hand at any point and I will bring you in if you have a follow-up question for any of our panelists. So I think next I'll move on to Miguel. How do we show people who are not fluent in energy what we mean by a system, and why is nuclear so important to that?
Yeah, so the common narrative I hear when out in the world really is nuclear or renewables, right? People have a misconception that it's a competition, that we're competing for the same place on the grid. Whereas functionally they play very different roles in the energy system. Renewables provide low cost but intermittent power, while nuclear provides dispatchable power and system inertia, which is key for grid frequency regulation. And without this kind of whole system, electricity demand simply isn't met, and so they need to work together. So we really need to think differently about how we communicate this. And I think one way of doing this is thinking about any analogies we could use. So if we look at the definition of a system, it's a regularly interacting or interdependent group of items forming a whole. I'm sure we can all think of lots of examples of that. So for example, you've got an ecosystem, a healthy diet, the human body. These are all good examples of how a system needs a balanced approach. So take a healthy diet. Most people understand that you need carbs, fats, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and that each play an important role in a balanced diet. If any of these are missing, this causes problems, as does too much of one thing. Likewise, an ecosystem requires a balance. We need the right amount of plants, insects, prey, predators to keep everything in check and functional. And people generally understand these concepts, and I really think this is how we should try and communicate about the energy grid. Ultimately, when talked about in this way, the advantages of nuclear become abundantly clear. And it also goes some way to explain our addiction to fossil fuels, as these play the same role in the energy system as nuclear would, except nuclear does not contribute to global warming like fossil fuels do. So what else can we do? We can also try and gamify the concept. Games are an excellent way to present a problem and give players an opportunity to come up with a solution for themselves. No one really knows what the future energy system will look like. You know, everyone's got their ideas and their opinions, but you know, everyone's got different thoughts about it. And like any system, though, there are key roles that need to be filled, and only really a balanced grid filling these roles has a chance to be successful. So at Curious Games, we actually developed a game that does that, called Megawatt. It allows players to explore this problem for themselves. So all energy technologies have strengths and weaknesses, and these are exposed as the game goes on through natural and human events that occur. So we've delivered Megawatt to schools in the UK and undertook some surveys of knowledge and perceptions of different energy types before and after playing the game. And in playing the game, you find that actually nuclear and renewables form an excellent partnership for supplying sustainable and resilient energy to our grids. Hydro and carbon capture are also key enablers to a secure grid. And the students who played the game learned this implicitly without ever directly being taught this. They discovered it themselves. Which brings me to a really great quote by a Chinese philosopher, which is, "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn." And I really think we should reconsider how we apply this philosophy to educating about the importance of nuclear energy, both at school and in the wider world.
Yeah, I agree. We should all have a go at trying to run the grid, because it's actually obviously incredibly difficult, and these decisions, need to be made by human beings, and it's fascinating to hear that you can have a go as a game. So thanks, Miguel. I'll move next on to Tad and Indy. As our outside nuclear representatives on the panel, how have your opinions on nuclear shifted since finding out more about it?
Yeah, thanks, Edie. So the project that Indy and I were involved with was called Fresh Eyes, and EDF set it with the intention of getting young people with no formal knowledge of nuclear to kind of make it a more accepted aspect of the UK's drive towards cleaner energy.
So the goal of the project was to reposition nuclear in the public eye as something that works alongside renewables towards a greener future, rather than doing the opposite, which many people believe it does. And nuclear energy at the moment is perceived by many people as being quite scary, dangerous, and it's often confused with nuclear weaponry. So they wanted us to create a campaign that really shifts the public perception.
And at the beginning of this brief, Indy and I were actually quite resistant to doing it. We thought nuclear was completely evil, and we were actually going to sit out of the pitch. And many of our course mates also felt like this up until the day before. And to just put it into context, this was the only contested pitch of the whole year. And we were working on things like gambling, alcohol, and fast food for the whole year, and no one ever contested them. But we reluctantly researched it more and obviously realised that it's actually an incredibly viable solution alongside renewables.
So there are a few things that you're probably all well aware of that we had no idea about, that like massively shifted our perception. And a few of these were that it's actually steam coming out of the towers. We thought it was smoke. One person's nuclear waste from a whole lifetime can fit inside a Coke can. It's got a super low carbon footprint. And every time a nuclear energy plant is shut, fossil fuels are used instead. We're all super concerned with our own personal carbon footprint, but there's no point in driving an electric car if you're burning fossil fuels to charge it. So since researching it, we now believe that relying on nuclear energy isn't the end goal, but it's a way of getting there and tackling the climate crisis, because net zero is impossible with renewables alone. That's a bit about our journey.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's really interesting to hear an open and honest perspective on coming round. Thank you for sharing that. I'll move next on to Nancy. How can national energy policies bring more nuclear projects abroad?
Well, thanks, Edie. To begin with, any national energy policy sets the direction or gives the direction to the country and to even private sector players on the direction the government wants to take in terms of development of energy resources and provision of energy to the population. And the energy sector is pretty interrelated with different sectors within the economy, and it has the potential to lift the population out of poverty. So when a country is developing its energy policy, it considers a number of targets. Given that energy resources are geographic specific, so different countries will have different options, but the goal or the targets are generally the same: to ensure adequate supply, to ensure the security of supply, to ensure that the energy provided is affordable and it is at a competitive rate. So for countries considering different energy options, and basing this against these targets, then energy like nuclear, which is clean and can help in achieving affordable cost for the population, is considered against these targets. And fortunately, nuclear power fits the bill in achieving most of these targets. So once a country decides its energy policy and decides the direction it's going to take, this influences what resources it will exploit. So bringing nuclear energy into the long-term sort of energy plan for a country helps in then determining what kind of infrastructure is necessary to develop nuclear power generation in the country. So in this way, I think governments can help bring on board more nuclear power projects if the analysis is really based on achieving these targets, because nuclear has really good potential to help any country achieve its energy goals as well as its economic growth and development targets. Yeah, these are my thoughts.
It's interesting that it keeps coming up that if you play the game where you actually do have to make the decisions, or you look at the evidence, that it just becomes clearer and clearer that nuclear, despite having a difficult relationship with some elements of public opinion, is actually an incredibly viable and helpful contributor to an electricity grid system. Thank you, Nancy, for your perspective. And Matthew, thank you again for joining us at an unsightly middle of the night hour. What do you think is the most effective strategy to get nuclear in the same discussions as climate change?
Thank you. And I don't think there's really a silver bullet to get nuclear as part of the climate discussions. It's going to take a journey. I think really two important factors are education, as others have said, and advocacy. So for education, for example, for North American Young Generation in Nuclear, we have our young volunteers go to schools, they talk about their perspective, what they do day to day, so it humanizes the industry. We also have our own children's books. So we've developed 2 children's books just talking about nuclear power, so Marie's Electric Adventure and George's Energy Adventure. And really those are school readings to introduce children at a young age to nuclear in non-confrontational ways. So it's just learning about it in a fun way. We've sold these books, we have them at schools, we have them at libraries. We also have drawing contests as well, so we engage with young children, and every year we have a different topic. So this year was radiculture, so how radiation and agriculture go together. Before, we've had nuclear in space. So again, it's just getting a part of different discussions. For high schools, we just have a different topic every year. So we ask high school students to write about nuclear with different topics. So it could be about climate change, and they're doing independent research to learn about it for themselves. So we're not forcing the message down their throat. They're learning independently about that. So I think education is a big part. And then having people at climate conferences, having people at rallies, having people just talking to other people and just saying, this is what I do, or this is why I'm excited about nuclear. Because then you'll get those unique type of conversations, SMRs, nuclear isotopes, if people work in nuclear waste, all these type of questions members of the public can actually ask someone that works in the industry and say, oh, I watched the Chernobyl miniseries, or oh, I'm just very concerned about this, or I heard this. It's just a good way to have that discussion. So there's no one way that will get us in those conversations, but I think the more we talk about it, the more we have people talking with people, and the more we give people the tools they need will really help change the nuclear narrative.
Thanks. I think we've all had comments and questions on the Chernobyl series, if any of us have ever told anyone at a dinner party that we work in or related to nuclear. Sarah Lynn, did you want to come in on that point?
Yeah, I just wanted to build on Matt's point about STEM and outreach, and I think it was a phrase you used, Matt, about not putting nuclear down people's throats. So I think that was a really big part of, I briefly mentioned the school speaking competition that we ran earlier. We purposely called that Speak Up for Net Zero rather than Speak Up for Nuclear or anything like that. It was, for us, we wanted to engage the wider young generation in this competition in the hopes that they would just happen to learn about nuclear within the competition itself, alongside all the other great things that is going on within the energy sector, and more the local sort of actions that young people can take in their areas, and just give them the opportunity to then learn about nuclear rather than get it shoved down their throats. And I think that was a really important thing for us to do, that and it really feeds into that collaboration piece that we really wanted to get out of it, and we touched on earlier. We don't want to be in competition with renewables. We want to show that we can work together, and that competition and having a very neutral sort of topic and title was really key to doing that. So I think that's really important.
I think on that subject, I think I'd like to ask a question to Tad and Indy, which is, why do you think some young people are so resistant to even considering the nuclear power option, and why do you think it's been branded so in popular culture?
Sure, yeah, so I'm kind of echoing what Matt said here a bit as well. But yeah, nuclear is obviously, in our opinion, currently seen by many as being in completely opposition to caring about the planet. And then on top of that, there are so many things in popular culture that reaffirm this viewpoint, as well as a massive lack of education on it in general. So one thing that Indy and I thought about when we were doing our project was how nuclear energy has become synonymous with the symbol for ionizing radiation. You know, it's a symbol literally designed to be a warning label to communicate danger or toxicity. And if you type the word nuclear into an iPhone text message, the predictive text automatically suggests the radiation emoji. So we found that in everyday conversation, nuclear has sort of become a shorthand for danger.
Yeah, and people's perceptions are also massively outdated because their opinions are formed based on its depiction in popular culture. So when you say nuclear, people think of The Simpsons and evil Mr. Burns, as well as like Chernobyl, like as a series and a movie, and the terrifying coverage of nuclear weapons as well, because it's the only other time they ever hear the word nuclear said in the media.
And on that, can I ask Miguel what the YGN are doing on COP26, and how do we engage the public and policymakers and negotiators in this and make the conversation a bit more broad?
Yeah, so I mean, we have a number of events and activities planned to really get nuclear at the table. But I think for for COP26, of course, like education about nuclear is always it's very important and will form a core part of our message. But more than anything, I think we want to just make a lot of noise and show the world that young people are reconsidering nuclear as a solution to the sustainable energy challenge. We've got a lot of things planned. I mean, thanks to the foresight of the team, we've secured an event space for both Tuesdays during COP at the University of Glasgow venue. It's a great venue close to the exhibition centre, and we're going to be hosting some networking opportunities for delegates, as well as a really exciting COP quiz and gig on one of the nights. We want interactions with us to be fun and contagiously enthusiastic about our mission, so people will remember us. And like everyone said, we're not ramming nuclear down anyone's throats. We want it to be part of conversation and at the table without any song and a dance about it, right? We just want it to be part of the conversation without all these kind of preconceptions. Alongside this, we've developed a campaign which will involve double-decker bus adverts, enormous gummy bears, and surprise public performances. Don't want to speak too much about the public performance, as it would be great to keep it a surprise, but we really want to mobilize young people to hopefully create kind of a viral moment at COP, alongside some great costumes and outfits and thoughtful, sustainable merchandise. One of the themes we'll be emphasizing is the energy density of nuclear, hence the gummy bear theme. So we'll have a huge inflatable gummy bear around with us, so look out for that. As well as this, we've got a gummy bear counting competition, so we've got a huge 3-litre jar of gummy bears, and people are going to kind of guess how many gummy bears they've got in there. And it's a little competition, just a little bit of fun, to kind of get people to just talking about the energy density of nuclear. And again, like everyone said, a key message is that we're not competing with renewables. We're pushing out fossil fuels, and we're the best based technology to do this. So we love renewables, and we'll be launching some kind of content and events emphasizing this point. And hopefully we can get the renewable groups to say the same thing about us, and start a real budding romance between the two industries.
I look forward to it. Sarah Lynn, did you want to come in and tell us a bit more about the Net Zero Needs Nuclear campaign and how you've managed to ensure that it's an international campaign?
Yeah, so thanks, Edie. So COP26, it's an international conference, so it's just so important for us to make sure that whatever we did, all our activities were as international as possible too. So we acted really early on ensuring that when we launched our international call for volunteers way back in August 2020 now, which just seems so long ago, we received over 50 applications to be part of the volunteer team, with a fifth of those being from the international community. So I'm really pleased to say we've got one volunteer on the team from Brazil, and then obviously we've got Matt on the panels, also part of the team, to give that Canadian perspective. Secondly, as we got this opportunity through the ENS and by extension Nuclear for Climate in the first place, we've worked really hard with them to ensure that international voice is there. So Nuclear for Climate, for those who might not be aware, is a grassroots initiative representing over 150 associations across the world. So that relationship was really key to us. We published the Net Zero Needs Nuclear position paper back in February of this year, and that gives the scientific justification on why net zero needs nuclear. And that paper calls on all negotiators and policymakers involved at COP26 to take a scientific and technology neutral approach to energy policy and financing. So that paper was shared globally with all the associations, and it's really mad when you think about it, but that paper is now supported by over 100 associations worldwide, including associations from Australia, Austria, Japan, Ghana, the US. I think we've probably got all the continents covered thereabouts. It is also supported by Women in Nuclear Global and its 53 chapters. So with thanks to those associations, the position paper has actually been translated into, last I heard, 17 languages. So that was a really big part of our international work. And then another really important link that is worth me mentioning is the International Youth Nuclear Congress, of which the UK YGN is a part of. And the IYNC has allowed us to work with various YGNs across the globe, raising awareness of the campaign and encouraging them to make the campaign their own. You know, we started this campaign in the UK just to give it some momentum, but it's really not our campaign. It is a campaign for everyone wanting to stand up for nuclear, and we really wanted to encourage the other YGNs to take it on as their own and do their own events as part of it. So we held workshops with them to let them know what the campaign was, told them what sort of activities we were doing, and have advice here and there how they could get involved. And it's just been really fantastic to see that actually happen. Like, it's mind-blowing when I've seen the French YGN, for instance, run their own social media campaign under the tagline Net Zero Needs Nuclear. And my particular favourite was seeing the Spanish YGN take to the streets as part of Pint of Science Spain. And they just spoke to various members of the public with Net Zero Needs Nuclear signs. And then we've heard about the Finnish YGN sending letters about the campaign to the chief negotiator for climate change in Finland. And we've just had various conversations and engagements with YGN colleagues in Australia, South Africa, the Philippines. So we've worked really hard in making sure it is an international campaign. And, you know, we've gone very used to juggling various time zones. Not quite as bad as Matt joining us at 3 AM this morning.
Thanks. And in keeping with the COP theme, so perhaps not necessarily in the order that you might be anticipating, Nancy, could I come to you in terms of sustainable development? How do you envision nuclear as part of the global effort to combat climate change, specifically in Kenya?
Well, thanks, Edie. I think there is more and more concern to ensure that energy generation keeps in line with protecting and conserving the environment. Whereas in Kenya, generally we are lucky to have a sort of green energy system because most of our power comes from geothermal and hydro. There's also growing concern about economic development and growth. So in terms of nuclear coming into the system in the long term, that is, I think it's quite a good option for our country, especially because not just for the energy policy goals, but also even for economic development. I mean, nuclear has the potential to create many jobs within our economy and to also just boost various industrial sectors, for example, the cement industry, and generally just sectors that will provide input and material to the nuclear power plant once we have it going. So I think in this, from this point of view, then nuclear is a good fit for sustainable development in the long term for our country. And again, our INDC, the target is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 30% by 2030. And even though by then nuclear will not be in the system in the long term, say by 2050, we will have nuclear in our system. And this will help us be well on a good path to a low carbon development pathway. Yeah.
That's good to hear. Matthew, have you noticed any shifts in opinions over the years towards nuclear, especially in regards to climate change?
Yeah, so I've been in the nuclear industry for just over 7 years, and I've really seen a big shift in how we talk about it and how it's talked about. So I think we're really focusing on the key messages of the positives, how it fights climate change, how it fights pollution deaths as well. Like, people don't really talk about that enough, but 8.5 million people a year are dying prematurely due to the burning of fossil fuels. So nuclear doesn't emit fossil fuel pollution. So this is a major benefit of our industry. We're also talking more about isotopes. We're talking about the sustainable development goals. And this is something I really saw at COP in Madrid. A lot of people didn't know about nuclear's other contributions to climate change, how it can help agriculture, how it's helping space missions, how it's doing all of these other positive things. So I've really seen a shift over the years. Before it was just almost taken advantage of, like nuclear is just in a silo. Now we're trying to integrate with more industries. We're trying to brand ourselves as clean and how we can address these issues. And we really see that with young people as well. Like, there's the stand up for nuclear events all around the world. And the one at Belgium was really successful with lots of net zero messaging and lots of pro-nuclear messages out there. In Toronto, we're going to have ours on Friday. So just getting young people and just people together just to go to the streets and to talk about how nuclear is impacting climate change and why we believe that. Because if we're not seen advocating for it, who else will? And really, that's why we have Nuclear Science Week. We have all these different initiatives. We have pro-nuclear movies like Pandora's Promise, Juice, The New Fire. So I see this, people that were against nuclear in the past, environmentalists, maybe they're not shifting to pro-nuclear, but just like it's had in Indy, if it can be a transition point, I think that's a good progress in what we're making. So I've definitely seen a shift of anti-nuclear going towards more, okay, this is a climate emergency, we need it now. Maybe it's not for the long term, but maybe we look at SMRs, maybe we'll look at a transition point. So yeah, I've seen some good progress over the years.
Well, I'll come then to Tad and Indy on your professional opinion on what needs to change to shift this perception.
Yeah, so from our perspective, nuclear has a sort of massive branding problem. And so, yeah, we kind of think that nuclear needs to be reimagined as something that is in line with our sustainability goals to escape the current climate crisis. And it's a bit like what Miguel was kind of talking about with the giant gummy bears and things like that. And Indy and I on our project thought about how we could kind of create a new visual language around nuclear, so it's less associated with danger. And in answering the brief, we reimagined the radiation symbol as a life ring to show that nuclear can be the kind of lifeline out of this climate crisis. And we'll share that in the chat with you guys later.
We also think that policymakers need to be totally transparent in its pros and cons. And like not undermine the past, but look positively towards the future. Like, we read loads of articles that were pro-nuclear that kind of downplayed the effects of Chernobyl, and this made us really like lose trust in it. But a better way of doing this would be to instead talk about how unlikely it is to happen, again with new precautions. And then lastly, we also think that there obviously needs to be more education on it, and we need to get more people that also support Extinction Rebellion on board. And we were slightly hesitant initially to join this panel, but we were really reassured by the fact that Zion Lights had left Extinction Rebellion to campaign for nuclear instead. So yeah.
Well, on the subject of Extinction Rebellion, I'll come to Miguel. What are your thoughts on XR, and how do you ensure others are receptive to your views and priorities?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I'm an environmentalist, and the combination of the current projections for temperature rise and the lack of action really does scare me. And when Extinction Rebellion first came onto the scene, I was a big supporter. I really believed in their message, and I actually joined in the first April Rebellion, as it was known, back in London in 2019. I took a few days off work and actually just went alone to support the cause, as it felt like something I had to do. I think one of the reasons for this was actually that I suspected that not many people, if any at all, would be like me from the nuclear industry actually present at the demonstrations, and I felt it was really important to actually represent the industry. I'm well aware of a lot of my colleagues' disapproval of my support, but ultimately a few disgruntled Londoners late for work was a small price to pay for, raising awareness of this is one of the biggest challenges we're ever going to face, and our inaction will lead to the death of millions. So I was still kind of confident in my justification for going. That knowing that I would likely interact with many green advocates that were against nuclear, I came prepared. I created about 100 leaflets highlighting the important role nuclear has to play in reaching net zero, as well as exciting innovations that Gen 4 reactors will provide. I just got chatting to people really and finding out why they were there and their thoughts on nuclear. I met so many weird and wonderful people from diverse backgrounds and diversity of thought, from artists to students to nurses to bankers, and the majority had a similar reaction when I first brought up nuclear. The baggage around nuclear is heavy, as we've mentioned, and most were sort of automatically against nuclear. But delving a bit deeper, very few could actually justify their views. It sort of came as a natural consequence of being part of the green movement. So I learned a lot about discussing nuclear with people, and the most important thing I found was that if you want people to listen and debate a topic like this, demonstrating my intentions was very important. So if they could see and understand that I was there for the same reasons as them, because I'm fed up with political inaction on climate change and I'm fed for the future of our planet, just like the same reasons that they were there, they could trust that I had the right intentions. And like Talindy mentioned, trust is so important with a topic like this, because there's been so much mistrust in the past. So that sort of trust was a great foundation for a good communication, as well as this kind of open language and humility as well. I mean, openly admitting my own incompetence and lack of knowledge in certain areas really encourage others to do the same and admit that actually, I don't really know anything about nuclear, and I don't know why I feel this way. Please educate me. And I found that you can engage with people very effectively that way. Of course, there are always people that would never change their mind, and who never will. One such man I'll always remember. He insisted all energy generation was a scourge and we should return to hunter-gatherer lifestyles. There'll always be people that won't budge, and sometimes it's better not to waste your time. But it's a wide spectrum, and the majority of people, given the opportunity, are rational and will listen to new perspectives and change their mind.
Yeah, I actually have a follow-up question on that, and then I'll come to Sarah Lynn. Did you find that the conversation got to a sort of debate of facts? Because I'm quite interested in the relationship between this being a very emotive topic and then actually a lot of the facts being in the favour of nuclear. And what obviously you've been actually sort of in the trenches discussing this with people, real people, and trying to convince them one-on-one. And I was wondering whether or not you had an opinion on the role of sort of cold hard facts versus an emotional conversation.
It was very much initially an emotive conversation. That was how everyone approached it. As soon as I kind of brought it up, it's kind of the association with all these other things that we're talking about. And it's kind of it's also, I think part of it is, I think a lot of people perceive climate change as a 21st century problem. So we need 21st century solutions, and nuclear is very much cemented in the 20th century as, you know, that's when it was developed, that's when it grew, that's when all the weird and wonderful things in nuclear happened in the 20th century. And people kind of associate that with old thinking, with kind of people that, you know, not caring about the environment, like Tad and Indy mentioned, and it was really kind of shifting that into the facts about actually nuclear is just a tool, right? It's not a way of thinking, it's a tool we can use for climate change. And once we moved away from the emotive bits and sort of moved towards the facts and the truth, I think that's when people were kind of a little bit more just open, and people just genuinely became interested and asked questions and wanted to find out more. Once we got past that initial hurdle of no, nuclear is bad.
Sarah Lynn, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Edie. The education piece is just so important. You know, a lot of people don't realise that nuclear is low carbon, and kind of like Tad and Indy said, that was one of the things that helped with the shift perception. But I think, you know, bringing all that into touching on that, and then the various references we've made to pop culture, I always remember back to I went back to school as someone that had just finished my degree, and I met up with some previous past teachers of mine, and I remember telling them really excitedly that I was off to work in Cumbria, in West Cumbria, to do a summer placement. And the minute I mentioned it and the name of the company, my old chemistry teacher kind of went, "Oh, you'll turn green." And I thought, no, I'm not going to turn green. Radiation isn't even green. And it was just really frustrating. And I just thought, at the end of the day, I had already decided that was the path that I wanted to take. I had done all my research, I'd done my degree, but for a teacher to come out with that, it just really worried me about how damaging that could be if other young people, impressionable people, were around to hear such a comment, and they would be scared. And you know, that could be really damaging and put them off joining an industry that they'd actually really love to join, as something that is key to our climate change battles. So, you know, within the industry, we talk a lot at the moment about really making sure that nuclear is in the curriculum. And I think it's just as important that nuclear is in the curriculum to educate our young people, our next generation, but also educate our teachers, as they are the person that will be sort of molding our next generation. So I just wanted to share that experience that sticks into my mind a lot in terms of pop culture. You know, The Simpsons. It is that, you know, the stereotypical pop culture coming through that even our teachers need to be educated on better.
Thanks. And Nancy, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I actually just have a short comment. Tad and Indy mentioned the importance of transparency, especially from a government perspective and in communication to the masses, particularly about nuclear. And as we've mentioned here on this panel, it's quite an emotive subject. And what we've noticed is that if you engage the public with both the pros and the cons of nuclear, and as you lay out the cons or the challenges, explain what the industry has done to mitigate, like what has been learned, and going forward, what the industry is doing to ensure this is not experienced again. Then people begin to build trust and begin to slowly accept the technology. So I totally agree that transparency is important. Acknowledge that there are challenges, but show what is being done to deal with these challenges. Thank you.
Thanks. And Matthew, did you have any comments on this or an idea on how the nuclear industry might need to change and do better?
So I think the nuclear industry is doing some good things. They're changing their branding. They're trying to get a different perspective. But I think it's really empowering the workers in the nuclear industry to join part of these movements. So if you already have a group such as North American Young Generation Nuclear or Women in Nuclear or NIYGN, and these are volunteers that are strategically thinking about how to do this, and they're part of other groups like Extinction Rebellion or Greenpeace. Everyone brings their own perspective. So I think for companies, rather than trying to build a change program themselves to shift public opinion, just letting their staff, be part of these organizations or tapping into that, sponsoring when we do initiatives or drives, because each organization has a different network, they have a different perspective, but it's very different if I'm going on my own time as just a low-level employee talking to school children about how passionate and what I've learned versus someone in a suit that's the director of federal relations telling them how great this is for the climate. So I think really just, taking what we already have, synergizing, coming together, and that's what I've really been happy for the COP26 delivery team. The nuclear industry worldwide comes together. So the IAEA, WNA, all these different groups, so scientific and change makers coming together so we have this concrete message with facts and emotion coming together. I'd really love to see from the nuclear industry a Chernobyl miniseries or equivalent, but pro-nuclear. That's out there. Like, that's the big challenge I have for the nuclear industry is, can we, as an industry, get something really going that is popular, that is talked about? And, there's groups like Generation Atomic that are doing Mean Mondays, where they just have like a funny, every Monday, just little article or cartoon about nuclear. We have these take actions. So again, it's all these different ways to get the message going, and all of our groups are doing something different. So that's the multi-prong approach. But yeah, having a Chernobyl miniseries that's pro-nuclear from the nuclear industry, I think would be amazing.
Well, that is the struggle of running utilities, is often utilities, no one notices them when they go well, and they only notice them when they go horribly wrong and stop people from living the lives that they want to live. I know that other industries have the same problem, so that people appreciate the end benefit, but they don't necessarily acknowledge all the things that go into getting it there. So I think we have to come up with a really good story that isn't just everything's going fine and the electricity is being generated. But that's probably what it should be, one of those slow documentaries maybe, where you just watch the turbines spin and everything's jolly. Miguel, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up a point Matt made about how the different, when it's an individual using their own time to go into a place and talk about something, it's a very different message. And I kind of wanted to challenge why is STEM engagement always left to the youth? Why do senior people not do the same thing? And I understand that, I understand the reasons for it, right? It's easier for children to relate and engage with younger people, and more senior people are maybe more important and don't have as much time. But I really think they offer a completely different almost service to children. So there's different kinds of inspiration, right? I mean, if I'm a student at school and a young person like one of ourselves come in, we can kind of show how they could be in the near future, and that's very inspirational. But I think if a senior leader of the nuclear industry came in to talk to me at school, it would kind of show me that I matter, that like that what I want to do and my future aspirations are important. I mean, if someone important has come to my school and spoke to me, that means I must matter. And I think senior people kind of just push it on to the youth to do it, and I understand why that's the case, but I'd really like to see a bit of a change there, and get people, you know, if they want to make a difference, actually go into schools and talk on an individual basis and give up their time, rather than expect graduates to do it all the time. So just a little challenge for the senior execs. See if anyone wants to go into a school, see if they're brave enough.
I think that's an excellent challenge, and I encourage everyone to speak to their execs if they're able. I think I'd like to just, the last sort of 15 minutes of our panel discussion, or possibly even less, if we have some questions, or people can start thinking about their questions that they'd like to ask the panel. But looking towards the practicalities of making this a reality, Nancy, I was wondering if I could come to you and ask what are some of the issues with the financing schemes that we see in nuclear?
Well, thanks, Edie. I think, like you said, one of the important things to consider when implementing a nuclear power project is the financing. And this is particularly challenging for nuclear power plants because, like other large or mega infrastructure projects, they are capital intensive. And we know that financial resources are scarce for many countries. And then also there's the issue of long construction periods, particularly for nuclear power plants. We've seen delays in implementing many of the projects globally. And the problem with this is that the longer your construction period is, you build up on cost overruns, you build up on interest during construction, which makes an already expensive project even more expensive. And we've seen that many financial institutions, particularly the multilateral financial institutions, they do not finance nuclear as part of their policies. And this is one of the challenges we face, because it then reduces where any project can source for its financing. But then we've begun to see innovative financing schemes taking place within the industry. For example, in the Baraka power plant project in the United Arab Emirates, we've seen the Korean consortium actually coming into the project, not just as the contractors, but also taking an equity position, providing capital for this project, which they are part of implementing. So I think, and also as there's the global push to bring on board more nuclear power plants to help combat climate change, then we begin to see more innovative financing schemes. We begin to see vendors, instead of just looking at themselves as technology providers, but also taking a part in the development of different projects, taking equity positions, providing capital, as well as implementing the projects. So I think we'll continue to see many of these innovative schemes, as well as schemes such as private sector coming in through elements such as build, own, operate schemes, which haven't been used in nuclear power plant projects, but have been used for different infrastructure projects like roads, bridges in many countries. So the key thing to remember here, I think the challenge is the risk involved in nuclear power plant projects. This is also one of the things that contributes to the high cost. So if the industry can find ways going forward to reduce the amount of risk within the industry to help in implementation of the project, then we begin to see even perhaps multilateral financial institutions begin to take an interest to finance such projects. Yeah.
Thanks very much, and I hope that some of those multilateral options. Oh, we have a question come in. Would Christine like to ask her question directly?
Sure. Thank you for the very interesting discussion. I was wondering if you'd engaged with or partnered with any non-nuclear focused climate change organizations in the lead up to COB. And if you haven't, what have you found the barriers to be in terms of doing so? Thank you.
Any volunteers to take that question first, or I'll just ask it to all of you and go individually. Well, Miguel or Sarah Lynn, would you like to pick this up?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that in the initial stage. So that was really, really important to us. The nuclear industry It is so well known for just talking to itself. We all talk about this echo chamber that we have in the industry. So from the off, we were very much, we need to break through that. So we've had some really good discussions and worked with various organisations. I know Miguel will probably want to give you more information on certain things that we've done, including a very exciting quiz that we've got coming up soon. But we have very early on this year, we did a lot of stakeholder engagement. We reached out to various other institutes, because the Nuclear Institute is an institute in itself. We have those contacts from the Institute of Physics, for instance, the ICAME, the IMECE, and so on. So we met up with loads of representatives from there. Really, a really good relationship for us has been the Young Energy Professionals. They are a young members branch of Energy UK. So nuclear falls under their remit, but they are so much wider than that. As well as Prospect, who is a trade union for the energy sector. So one part of our strategy that's been really important in that building that collaboration has been our webinar series. So we've put on a series of webinars over the last year, one of which was focused on the role of nuclear, renewables and clean technology in meeting net zero. So we had representatives from outside the nuclear industry involved in that. Our second one focused on the role of nuclear and renewables in the green recovery. And at the end of October or mid-October, I'm really excited about the next webinar of that series, which will focus on other youth initiatives for championing climate change action. So we have representatives from the Energy Institute coming along, because they've been running an initiative called Generation 2050, which is very much about working with policymakers as well. The Young Energy Professionals, they'll be there as well. They've done a survey reaching out to their members to hear more about their thoughts on net zero. And something that I'm really excited about is that we do have a speaker from Mock-Up, which took place last year. So for those that aren't aware, Mock-Up was a volunteer youth sort of initiative where a lot of young people across the globe just got together and held their own COP to show how it should be done properly. And it was covered in the media. It did really, really well. So we've got a representative coming along to speak at that. So we have tried a lot to speak to these people and get them involved. And I'm happy to say we haven't had much pushback, really. Everyone's been really, really up for working with us. And I think that goes back to, you know, what we've talked about, in that we're all in this together. We're all volunteers. We all want to do our part to meet net zero, and we recognise that we need to work together to do that. And then we've got our big fat COP quiz, which I think Miguel probably wants to say a little bit about.
Yeah, so very early on, we did identify that, you know, collaboration with renewables was key, and we wanted to kind of create some events together. So we came up with this idea to come up with a quiz, just a fun quiz based off kind of other UK quiz shows like Mock the Week, Have I Got News For You, kind of stealing rounds from that. And we wanted it to be a collaboration, so we reached out to a lot of NGOs and a lot of renewable organisations. Now, I agree, Sarah, we didn't get any pushback. We also got a lot of apathy where people just didn't reply. We've partnered with YEP in developing this quiz together, and we've got someone from the different parts of the industry, not just nuclear, coming along, and we're hoping our audience is a bit wider than the nuclear reach. But yeah, this was very early on a key message that we wanted to get across, and I think it's not, I would have liked to have been more successful, and hopefully we can build a lot of relationships at COP. I think for me, one of the reasons that, you know, for us, the most powerful message would be someone from the renewables industry coming out and saying net zero needs nuclear. Because the whole issue of trust and intentions is kind of established, and you know that, okay, they're not saying that for their own gain, but they're saying it because it's true. And that's something we've been trying to push from the start. But I think because of the wider just political global inaction, is that renewables are still having to fight for their corner to get more renewables. So it's almost like to get them to fight for us as well is difficult. And it's something that we kind of acknowledge, because the nuclear industry has been fighting for its reputation for a very long time. But yeah, I think it's a huge priority for us at COP to once we're actually there in person, to just go out and speak to the renewable organizations. And with the couple of events that I mentioned, we'd love to get someone from, you know, IRENA or yeah, any established renewable organization to come and talk and just be part of the table that we want nuclear to be at.
Great. And one last question for me to Sarah Lynn, which is, what specifically is the YGN hoping to get out of COP?
Thanks, Edie. So it's a big question. We've been working on this for a while now, and our specific aims have changed over time. But what's always been a constant is we want to get nuclear at the table at COP26. It needs to be adequately represented in clean energy discussions alongside renewables as a key part of our energy mix for net zero. More specifically, for COP itself now, we will be calling for COP26 President Alok Sharma, or a member of the high-level COP26 team, including the UN, to make a positive public statement at COP26 about the role of nuclear energy in the journey to net zero. And there's many enablers we've identified to help achieve that. A really big one is media engagement. So we're hoping to do lots of weird and wonderful things at COP to get their attention. So that's all the great things that Miguel was talking about earlier, you know, the gummy bears and bus adverts. Hopefully that will be our way of trying to put pressure on the COP26 team to make that statement on nuclear. And that collaboration piece that we've already touched on, that's so important to us in developing relationships outside the industry with NGOs. And you know, on top of that, the voice of the public is just so important. So we'll be engaging with the public as much as we can in Glasgow also. And I think what's most important to me is we have done a lot of work over this last year, and I think we just need to go now and enjoy it. We need to enjoy it. We need to talk to people, get them excited about nuclear by seeing how passionate we are about it. It's a really fantastic opportunity to shout out about it and show how proud we are to work in this industry. I think we've touched on this as well, like what has really united us as volunteers and getting involved in this campaign has been our common passion for saving the planet. We're all young volunteers who joined the industry in the first place because we truly believe in its role of nuclear in allowing us to meet net zero and combat climate change. And so this is our moment to do that and be proud and get people excited. So for everyone listening, I really encourage you to get involved as much as you can. You know, whether that's visiting our website, whether that's making your own noise about COP and nuclear in the run-up, sending letters to policymakers. We need all the help we can get, because together we're so much stronger.
Lots of nods, and I assume lots of nods from everyone who doesn't have their camera on as well. I think we'd all like to see proper recognition of nuclear's role in climate change and potential role. Are there any questions from the audience at this point? We have 15 minutes left, and I'm very keen to hear from those of you that have not had a chance to speak yet. If not, if all of your questions have actually been answered by our brilliant panel, what I think I might do is ask each of our panelists to give a concluding statement or comment based on the conversation that we've had today, just summarising their position and their recommendations for the upcoming season and the ongoing fight against climate change. So, and unless there are any questions? No? Okay. Well, I think I'd like to go in reverse order to the way in which we started. So, Matthew, would you like to give an off-the-cuff closing comment?
Yeah, so I was part of COP25. We had a very small nuclear delegation there. You know, our team did all we could, dressing up in polar bear suits, making a big stir, having pro-nuclear messages, but there's clearly not enough, and opinion at the climate conference was not pro-nuclear, and that was very widespread. It was either not the right time, even though we just declared a climate emergency, or not the right choice. And I think this is what we're going into COP26. It's a little bit different, but it's very similar. People think that renewables are the only way to get to net zero, and that can't be the message we have. So I encourage everyone to do everything you can, you know, join our petition, come to our website, empower your employees, empower yourself, learn about things, speak to your neighbors, speak to your hairdresser. If you're going on a Tinder date, talk about nuclear, show your nuclear pride, wear your nuclear pins, and be a nuclear enthusiast. You know, we all need to do it ourselves. We can't always just ask someone else to do it. Why aren't you sharing your passion yourself? So build yourself, share that, and let's all get to net zero, because net zero needs nuclear.
Thank you. And some concluding words from Nancy.
I think what I would say is that in terms of the debate between renewables and nuclear, I think really these two technologies are not like fighting each other, let's say. They are really complementary within any energy system, because each one has a role to play. So if we begin to see it from that perspective, and also begin with the growing interest in nuclear power going forward, and also the general global aim to combat climate change, then I think nuclear will definitely be a good option for different countries going forward, even for small countries that at first, I mean, large nuclear power plants were not an option, but now the industry is evolving and is looking towards small and modular reactors which fit into smaller energy systems. So I think definitely going forward, nuclear has a place in any energy system. Yeah, those would be my closing remarks.
Thank you. Tad and Indy, concluding thoughts from you.
Yeah, so I just want to say thank you so much for having us on the panel as complete outsiders on nuclear. And I think that kind of summarises kind of our final remarks, that it's so important to engage people that are outside the industry, as you've all done. And as Matt mentioned, you know, kind of speak to people that are resolutely anti-nuclear, people that are, as Miguel said, completely apathetic. And yeah, people that are completely blinded by their preconceptions, because that's how we ultimately kind of tipped in favour of it. So thanks again.
Miguel?
Yeah, so I guess I just want to conclude by, like, if you look at the future, if you look at, let's say, 50, 100 years time, like, what do you want the world to look like? And, you know, the idea of massive rewilding, giving land back to nature, dense cities, efficient use of resources, and everyone's got power and food, and, you know, the world's, when you kind of come up with that sort of dream scenario, you can't do that without nuclear. It's kind of almost impossible. So yeah, if we just kind of think about where we want the world to be, and then how do we get there?
Thank you. And Sarah?
Thanks, Edie, and also thank you to everyone for inviting me as well. So I just want to state the sort of key benefits of nuclear in our position paper. So nuclear is low carbon, it's available, it's scalable, it's flexible, it can decarbonize other sectors, and it can aid in sustainable development globally. So the benefits are clear, and we need to shout out about it. But we also need to have open conversations and be transparent about the industry. And I think young people, particularly volunteers, we are just so powerful in advocating for climate change. It is us who will inherit, it is us and our next future generations who will inherit this climate emergency. And it's up to us to really shout and make sure that key decisions are taken now to enable us to meet net zero and have a bright and happy and abundant future for us and our children. And we need to work together to do that. So please, 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 if any of this has resonated with you, please do get involved. Visit our website, netzeroneedsnuclear.com. Come up to COP, come to Glasgow if you're able to. Just get involved in everything that's happening and have those conversations, because you don't realize how important it is to change people's minds and have these conversations. Even if it's not just changing their mind, having the conversation in the first place, it is so important. So just do something, just get involved.
And if you do want to come to COP, come to our quiz next week, because if you win, you could get a ticket to COP. So come along.
Excellent. Well, with the opportunity to win a ticket to COP, and I'd like to thank you everyone for coming. Thank you so much to our panelists who have been brilliant and, a fantastically engaging conversation, even through the screen. So I'd just like to say thank you very much to our panelists, and thank you to my colleagues at BEIS who have made this happen, especially Ella and John, who've put a lot of hard work in behind the scenes to make this happen. And everyone's very quiet on the questions, so I think we've solved it. So well done, everyone, and have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.